Origins of Mammon. Have you ever felt it? That strange pull when you see something valuable, the quickening of your pulse, the sudden focus of your attention, as if something ancient inside you has awakened. I've spent decades tracking this sensation to its source, and all paths lead to a name that's been whispered for millennia: Mammon. Most believe it's just another word for money or greed, but I've discovered it's so much more. The truth has been hiding in plain sight, encoded in ancient texts and buried in etymological roots that few have fully excavated. The name Mammon originates from the Aramaic word mamona, simply meaning wealth or riches. But language holds power, and this particular word carried a weight that transcended its humble origins. In ancient Semitic cultures, to name something was to acknowledge its power, to give it form. The Aramaic root mammon connects to concepts of that which is trusted, or that in which one places confidence. Consider that for a moment, wealth as the object of trust. Not gods, not community, not even family, but material possession. The concept was revolutionary and dangerous enough that it needed its own designation. Mammon's dark evolution. The transformation of Mammon from abstract concept to personified entity is one of history's most fascinating metamorphoses. I've traced this evolution through crumbling scrolls and fragmentary texts, watching as a simple noun became something far more sinister. The earliest hints appear in Hellenistic Jewish writings, where wealth begins to be described not just as a possession, but as a force with agency, something that could call to or seduce its possessors. By the 2nd century CE, early Christian writers were describing Mammon with increasingly personal attributes: cunning, patient, observant. The abstraction was gaining consciousness. The pivotal moment came during the early medieval period when demonological hierarchies were being formalized. In these elaborate systems, Mammon found his place among the princes of hell. What's remarkable is how his character differed from other demons. While entities like Asmodeus, Lust, or Satan himself were portrayed as actively aggressive, Mammon was described as methodical, calculating, and patient. He didn't need to chase his victims. They would come to him willingly, drawn by their own desires. The 9th century text, Liber de Officii Spirituum, describes him as the demon who waits at crossroads of decision, offering not immediate pleasure, but distant prosperity, making him more dangerous than those who promise quick satisfaction. No man can serve two masters. The most famous reference to Mammon comes from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus delivers a warning that has echoed through centuries. No man can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and Mammon. I've spent years analyzing this passage in its original context, and what's striking is its absolutism. There's no middle ground offered, no compromise suggested. The Greek text uses doulo, to be enslaved to, implying not just casual service, but complete ownership. The warning isn't about having wealth, it's about being possessed by it. A subtle but crucial distinction that many translations fail to capture. What makes this biblical warning so powerful is its psychological insight. It recognizes that wealth doesn't just change what we have, it changes who we are. 1st century Palestine was experiencing dramatic economic shifts under Roman occupation. Traditional communal values were being replaced by individualistic pursuit of profit. Tax collectors became symbols of this new order, enriching themselves by extracting wealth from their own communities. When Jesus spoke of Mammon, his audience would have immediately understood the social implications, the choice between community values and self-enrichment, between inherited wisdom and the new economic order. Why Mammon still rules. The most unsettling aspect of my research into Mammon is the realization that his influence hasn't diminished with time. It has evolved, adapted, and perhaps grown stronger. Modern neuroscience has revealed that money activates the same brain regions as primary rewards like food and sex. The mere symbol of currency triggers the nucleus accumbens, our brain's pleasure center, creating powerful reinforcement loops that medieval theologians would have recognized as the chains of spiritual bondage. When ancient texts speak of being enslaved to mammon, they're describing what we now understand as neurobiological reality. What's particularly insidious is how wealth worship restructures moral reasoning. Harvard research has demonstrated that simply being exposed to images of money makes people less helpful to others, more self-sufficient, but also more isolated. In controlled experiments, participants primed with money concepts became less willing to ask for help and less willing to provide it, a perfect microcosm of Mammon's isolating influence. Other studies reveal that the wealthy consistently demonstrate lower empathy scores and have more difficulty accurately identifying emotions in others. The medieval concept of Mammon, blinding, his followers finds perfect correspondence in these findings. Wealth literally diminishing our ability to see and connect with fellow humans. Famous tales of deals with Mammon. Throughout history, certain individuals have been rumored to have made direct pacts with Mammon, bargains that brought immense wealth at terrible cost. Jacob Fugger, the 16th century German banker who became the richest man in history relative to his time, was said to have encountered Mammon in the form of a well-dressed merchant offering financial insights that defied conventional wisdom. Fugger's unprecedented wealth, he personally financed kings and popes, came with rumors of a contract signed in a private chapel in Augsburg. What's verifiable is that Fugger died surrounded by his account books, having never enjoyed his vast fortune, consumed until his final breath with increasing it further. The 19th century brought the strange case of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who rose from ferry operator to railroad tycoon with such improbable speed that competitors accused him of supernatural assistance. Servants reported overhearing Vanderbilt in conversation with an unseen presence in his study late at night, discussing financial moves that consistently devastated his rivals. What's particularly interesting about Vanderbilt's case is his famous last words. After amassing a fortune worth over $100 billion in today's currency, his final utterance was reportedly, "I have been cheated." The nature of that perceived deception has been debated by historians ever since. The evolution of money itself, from physical coins to digital abstractions, represents Mammon's most profound transformation. I've traced this progression through historical records, watching as wealth became increasingly detached from physical reality. Ancient coins bore the weight of their metal value. Paper money represented gold in vaults. Modern currency represents government promises. Cryptocurrency represents mathematical solutions and collective belief. With each step, money becomes more abstract, more faith-based, and Mammon's influence becomes more difficult to recognize and resist. What's particularly fascinating is how financial instruments have evolved to obscure moral considerations. Medieval merchants faced direct ethical questions in their transactions. Modern financial systems, with their layers of abstraction, allow participants to remain unaware of the ultimate impacts of their investments. The 2008 financial crisis revealed how mortgage-backed securities and credit default swaps had become so complex that even those trading them didn't fully understand what they represented. Homes and livelihoods being gambled with through mathematical abstractions. This distancing effect, where money becomes separated from its human consequences, was precisely what medieval writers warned about when they described Mammon's ability to blind his followers to everything except wealth itself. Historical resistance to Mammon's pull. The most fascinating examples come from unexpected places. In 13th century Italy, The Franciscan movement emerged as a direct challenge to growing materialism. Francis of Assisi, born to a wealthy merchant family, publicly stripped himself of fine clothes and renounced his inheritance, a dramatic rejection of mammon that inspired thousands to similar acts of voluntary poverty. What's particularly interesting is how this movement coincided with the rise of banking in northern Italian cities. The Franciscans weren't responding to abstract theology, but to a specific economic transformation they witnessed firsthand: the increasing power of wealth to determine social worth. Eastern philosophical traditions developed their own countermeasures against Mammon's influence. Buddhist practices of dana, giving, and aparigraha, non-possession, weren't just moral teachings, but practical psychological techniques. Modern neuroscience has validated their effectiveness. MRI studies show that acts of generosity activate pleasure centers in the brain more powerfully than personal acquisition. The regular practice of giving literally rewires neural pathways, making generosity more rewarding than hoarding. I've interviewed wealthy individuals who practice structured giving programs, and many report the same experience. What begins as a disciplined moral exercise gradually becomes a source of genuine satisfaction that wealth accumulation never provided.